Okay, here we are again. So just to rephrase what I mentioned, we made courses, we made an assignment. Uh, I want to go through some of the properties of the assignment before we start adding existing questions to the assignment. I'm going to show you a little bit of the question infrastructure so you can see how it's structured. We're not going to be talking about creating new questions, although I'll give you directions on how you can actually go about doing so using the simple infrastructure that you are probably comfortable with your learning management system. The more advanced things require a lot more time to be able to address that we just don't have right now. Then we'll talk a little bit about how to integrate uh, adapt into your learning management system. I'll focus predominantly on Canvas because that's the one that's most applicable, I think, to the audience that we have here. Although we have videos of how you integrate it into other LMSs. It's relatively straightforward both ways. And then if we have time available, we'll get into learning trees and how you build learning trees and such like that. But we have 2 hours, two minus 20 minutes or so in order to be able to address that. And then after that, Raymond's going to come up in order to talk about his technology for helping to identify how students are writing and how they might be compromising their writing education by capitalizing on existing material created outside of the composition event, where AI is one of the particular issues of it. So let me go back to my demo account. And here we have Chemistry is for Lovers. I created an assignment, new assignment number 1. It's read it out. As you all remember, that means that students are unable to see this assignment if they are enrolled in the class. I can click on this or not. It doesn't matter because it's only for student perspectives and it doesn't matter. Now, I want to mention something briefly here, and that is this toggle switch right here that says main view. Main view, when you click on it, is something like a circuit breaker. Now, if you click on this, it will show you a series of toggles associated with each assignment that basically tells you what is released to the student. So in this case here, hobbies and interests, the scores have been released to the students. The solutions have not, the statistics have not, and even the points per question, which most of the time you expose it, but in some cases you may not want students to know what the points are for the question, especially if it's an exam and it's before the exam is opened up. Maybe too much information that you want to expose. May not be. And last thing, it has student names, and I ignore that aspect right here. If you flip on student names, it essentially makes all the student names for the grader randomized. So they're not real names. It's a way in order to do a single blind evaluation. So if you flip this switch here, actually when it's shown, then the students will, let me check if I make, I think it's this one right here hidden. The, uh, the TAs will be grading without knowing the names associated with the students that they are grading. So it provides a mechanism to ensure that we try to reduce the bias that's out there. We don't have that extended to the instructor, but we can do that, flip it for the instructor so that the instructor, only when he or she wants to be able to see the names connected to performances. For example, if they're doing an intervention or they want to talk to a student that is concerned about their performance, they can flip on that switch in order to be able to do so. Otherwise, it can be completely randomized out there. So right now, these are all manually toggled. I can come in and flip this switch here. That auto release option, which I glanced over that you guys don't have access to, sets it up so I can set this up to specific times and dates after the deadlines that's associated with this assignment. So I don't even have to pay attention to this. If you have lots of assignments, it can get really tiring to make sure that each student knows the students get access to every part of the question that you want them to be able to be exposed to. Statistics are oftentimes useful only if you have a class that's a sufficient size for the statistics to be useful. Otherwise, sharing the statistics can open up a can of worms with students that are unable to fully understand the scope of the statistics. So I'm going to flip to a control panel. And then what we have is this new assignment was opened tomorrow was going to be closed a week afterwards. It's released, which means it's available. Students can see that it's there, but they don't know what's inside of it, and they're unable to submit to anything that's inside of it. So let's click on this thing and look at this. So this is an empty assignment, which is what everyone should have had before you went off to your break. It has no questions right here in this tabulated view. It has a series of entries right here that are associated with the assignment, just like how the course had it connected there. I'm going to ignore the case study notes. That right there was developed from the next generation nursing programs. And the idea behind here is a more sophisticated case study infrastructure. So the traditional static case study infrastructure is you have a series of materials and you have a series of questions associated with the materials. And that could be used in law, it can be used in business, it can be used in sciences and a variety of other things out there. The nursing case study infrastructure is designed to be dynamic, which can also be implemented in other fields. So the students come in and they say, here's a set of data, here are some questions. And then that data changes. You get a new response, you get new MRI or something else like that, and then have the students reevaluate. This is part of the next generation nursing protocols that are out there, and that requires a bit more sophistication in order to be able to have this dynamic aspect that oftentimes doesn't extend to other fields. And I don't want to discuss that in more detail. You can have a summary of that assignment, which just basically gives you an overview of everything that's in the properties that you put in together. Here's the property that's out there. It's the same thing that you did before. The one exception is now it added a URL. And this is the URL that you can share with students in order to be able to do the problems, even though they can log in directly and get the information, and a QR code. This is the same QR code, not the specific one, but this where I get a copy of here, that was in my presentation in the beginning that I used for formative evaluation. So you can actually take a screenshot of this thing. If it's formative, you don't need to sign in, and you can just basically start looking at question after question that is formative in order to be able to evaluate it, which is useful when we do these presentations with audiences that at least are not set up for real-time interactions like here. And I can modify this right now. No students have submitted any question off of it, so there are no limitations in terms of being able to do so. This is the control panel. This is the same thing I showed before. The master switch, instead of doing it horizontally, it's now vertically, but it has the same information that's out there. Submission overrides. I mentioned that this is something similar to being able to assign certain students with additional permissions. For example, extended deadlines and other things like that. It's a bit more convenient than assigned tos. Auto-grade submissions, I already mentioned before. This gives you a list of the submissions that students have actually put in place. That's not overly important here. The most important things are the regrader and the open grader. Grader access, I can control access to graders to this assignment. Statistics, if I want to be able to track the statistics of student submissions and such, I can get that here, which again is not surprising. I don't have anything here because there are no statistics. The open grader is like this, and I really should show you this open grader. Hold on 1 second here. I need to make sure that the FERPA option is put in place on the other screen. So I'm going to take this class right here, spring. Okay. So what I did is I went to a specific course. This is the course that I taught last spring, and I'm going to a specific assignment. So lecture 15, it has two questions there. Students have already submitted. So if I looked at statistics, I can look at the statistics associated with these submissions and such. And this is not, this is a standard performance that we get for homework, the statistics. So it's not like a Gaussian that you normally get for exams. The open grader. Now I have FERPA on. I want to emphasize this. So these are not real names. So you don't need to be concerned that I'm exposing these things. And this is the open grader interface. Right now it's showing auto-graded questions, but every student got a different, should have gotten a different number. It looks like every student did not get a different number because it wasn't switched to algorithmic. So these different concentrations, this is what's called an ICE table, if it problem, if that means anything to you. And when this is algorithmic, and I may not have switched it, or the question may not be designed to be algorithmic, as I go through each student here, right now, it has this fake name right here, and I can look at what the student submitted. So they submitted these things, and these happen to be the correct answer. It's green. I can see the solutions up here is green that they submitted, and the percentage, the points of percentage that they got. And I can come in and I can just use the right arrow in order to be able to cycle through question by student in order to be able to do these things. When this is open-ended, it has the question here, and then the student's results are submitted down below, or the PDF is down below, and I can click on it and open it up. And then I can type in feedback associated with that right here, including canned responses and such like that. And it provides a mechanism to quickly go through, like this student right here, I know didn't submit anything. They all look like that they did it right. I didn't see anything red. Which is probably a little strange. Oh, there's one. So this student wrote in something different and got an incorrect value. It's going to. So when you had asked about a print up of everything, this would be what we want to print up onto a PDF for this class that goes into this student here. This is the question. This is the submission. This is the performance. This is all the things that are all put together off for that class. I don't think it's unreasonable for us to be able to put something like this in a PDF form for people to do. And such. It's kind of odd what they submitted. Okay. Anyways, Tigrum, you had a question?
Yeah, so I noticed that like these are the answers to each box, right? But what if it's a really long, like it has a lot of parts of the question? Is there a quick way to distinguish which answer goes with which box, or is it going to be kind of like presented like a list, like how you have it? Does
Well,
that
this
make
right here is color coded. This is what they wrote, color code, whether it's correct or not.
so? Let's just hypothetically say there's 30 parts to the question, right? And I want to know the 25th answer. Is it going to be listed and be the 25th one in the list, or is there a way to see the correct answer next to their answer?
Oh, you
Is
mean
that
down here? Oh,
yeah?
I see. Oh, I see what you're saying is know what this is up here and coupled it to it. Um, it's going to be complicated in order to try to rewrite the question in order to have the answer next to it. What we can do is we can flip a switch here in order to tell you what's the correct answer and what their submission was. So if you flip it right here, it basically takes this value and pastes it here and turns it color, a different color. Is that
Oh,
something
okay,
that
so good. Sorry, what were you saying?
you feel it you may
Yeah, I
like?
think it'd be easy to grade. Like if it's a long question, if there's like an answer key next to it, you could quickly like grade them and see, it will save time with grading if you like, if the answer key is next to it.
Well, right now this is auto graded, so there's no reason for um, unless you're talking about looking at this and trying to provide feedback to the student based off of what they wrote.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess you could like code it where they get partial credit.
They
Mm.
they do get partial credit based on the question that they have there, and we bake in a certain tolerance. Right now, it's baked in at 5%, but you can vary it in the question, and there's a bit more control I want to be able to implement. So there's more than that. Um,
So
for us.
thank you.
Um,
China.
okay. Um, but yeah, the option, if you have a lot of questions here, I can imagine it's difficult to go over here and find out which one here is connected to there. But we can make a little switch up that you click on it and it'll just it'll just show you the solutions that are down there. It obviously color coded it in green instead of that one, so you can actually bounce back and forth between the two. That's something we could probably get by the end of this year, but not at the top of our priority list. So,
Okay.
um, Ruth asked about questions about training on generating algorithmic questions. I don't have a video on it. I do have text on it here and there. It depends on which technology you want to use, WebWork or iMath AS. And then moving forward, there's probably stuff on iMath AS because it's WebWork. It's MyOpenMath, and they have an existing infrastructure to tap into. WebWork is a little bit less developed than iMath AS in this regards, even though it's probably more powerful for doing so. So this is exceedingly powerful infrastructure for facilitating rapid grading, and you can go to specific question two and then cycle through here, which makes it easier than I believe Canvas does, because Canvas requires you to constantly select the question every time you go to student by student. So this makes it easier when we have students that are grading exams, for example. They can actually select the question that they're doing and then go across and grade it right there. Um, so the now this question came up. I think Mohammed may have asked this. Um, the regrader. So invariably, what happens with people is that they get, and I can't show this because the FERPA stuff is not protected on here, and I apologize for here. So the regrader gives you the ability to go in and look at what students submitted, not the score, but the actual value. And then based on the value, you can come in and start to manipulate what the database score is. So it's a manual way in order to tweak and say, well, I made this question, but they're as an instructor, but the students may have found a different correct answer with a different interpretation than what I was expecting, which I hope most of us have had sort of experience like that. And that requires regrading the questions within the new paradigm. We will have the option in order to be able to make it so that you manipulate the question itself. You make the grader, the question part, the evaluation part of the question, if it's auto-graded, tweaked, and then have it resubmit it and then regrade based off of that. But right now it's based off of looking at the performance and seeing the distributions and then trying to say, okay, well, anyone who got a 3, they did it because of this reason, that's correct, and I give them full points. And it's a more insightful way to go to the database in order to be able to cross-reference these things, because we store the performance. We don't just store the score, which is the typical way that at least the Canvas gradebook operates, and we just want to have more control over that. So let me get back to what we're talking about. So the open grader and the regrader are exceedingly useful tools for looking at these things. Then we have grade books. I mentioned this before. The grade book in most learning management systems is integrated. So the actual data in a grade book is a cube. It has students, it has assignments, and then it has questions. So the information that you have is a sort of cube, but a cube is not a very effective way in order to store data and have people visualize it. So what we do is essentially at the assignment level, we provide the breakdown per question. Uh, while the course level does a breakdown per assignment. In other words, it averages, actually, it adds all the scores, it doesn't average, it adds all the scores and all the questions. So it takes this cube and basically pushes it all into an individual two-dimensional sheet. That's not the way you view things, I understand it. The key point is that when you go to the course grade book, it says this student for this assignment gets 37 points. And it doesn't tell you about which questions they got different points off. You go to the assignment grade book, and then you can see this individual student on this question, this question, this question had this score, this score, this score, and you can go in and click on it. And that gives you not just the more fine-tuned ability in order to tweak the values, it gives you better analytics in order to evaluate the questions and identify if certain questions have issues with the students and that need to be revisited and such like that. Okay. So that's the end of assignment protocols. Let's add questions to assignments. So this is the end of the most important component of what we're discussing today. We have no questions off of here. Up here, we have the ability to add questions and we have the ability to make a new question. Let's ignore the new question for now and let's talk about the add question. We can add questions in two ways. We can search or we can browse. So if I go and add questions here, I can search through question banks, which basically searches through the whole corpus, or I can add directly from into it. Now, when we add directly off here, I just need the ID number of the question and it adds it directly. Remember going back to talking about how the questions were organized? And I think I have one right here. So here are all the ID numbers. If I copy this ID number right here and I paste it right here, I will have added it to my assignment. Now it ignores the first part, the assignment number, because that doesn't matter anything. The only thing that matters is the question number. Now, this may sound a little clunky doing this, but this is by far the fastest way in order to add questions to your assignment, is to browse and say, okay, I'm looking at this question and here's the question. Actually, I don't like this question. This is a iMath AS question, and I can find the code, which is underneath each of the title, and I copy it, go to a different tab and paste it here. And now it's brought in. That's it. And now I've added it right here. It's ready to go. So I find browsing to be one of the better ways in order to be able to find the questions that we have in there, especially when you go through and you say, well, I have this sort of course. Who has created a similar course that presumably has given some thought in terms of the questions that they want to add, and let me jump on the bandwagon of their thinking and see if I actually want to be able to replicate it or do something else. And otherwise is I want to do a search in order to find all the questions and then evaluate them and start to cross-reference them. And you don't have that context that someone else has already gone through and built the questions around it or built the assignment off of those things. So basically anywhere, where are we? Anywhere that you find that question ID, you can add into here. I will also mention is that you can come in and grab at the top here all the questions in this assignment and paste it here. And now it brings in all the questions in the assignment. So you don't have to do this question by question. You can do this assignment by assignment. You can integrate across multiple assignments in order to do this. Of the two mechanisms, this is the one that I find works the fastest, most convenient, with the less pain. It's the sort of thing that you can be working on a project with someone. You can send an email to someone and say, hey, I really like question 144965. Take a look at this. I think this is really useful for what we want to do. Yeah. And it's a simple way in order to do it. Instead of saying, look at this assignment, at this question, and or look at this course, at this assignment, and look at question 5 titled this in order to be able to do that. I'll talk about the question bank in a moment since Tigran has a question.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like let's say you almost like the question, you just want to do a little tweak. Is there a place where it gives you the common license so you know how much freedom you have? Like
It's a good question. So let's go into this question. Actually, let me hold off on that just yet. Let me do the search part of that picture, and then we'll go into that question. So I mentioned direct import for ID. Anywhere that you could find the ID number of what you're interested in, you can paste it in, and that's that. Okay. Question bank is basically giving you the opportunity in order to do searches through existing questions, whether they are browsing through your question area, which is your personal questions, or your favorites that you've liked, you put that little red heart somewhere, or your own courses, or you want to do a search through all the Commons courses or all public courses. That's all fine and dandy, but search questions are the ones that you may think is most powerful off of here. This right here will do a search through the entire corpus. Again, we have 250,000 questions out there. They're not all in your field. So how many are in your field is a function of how much development we have done, and we have lots of development to go. But you have the ability to come in and say, well, I want to do a search through, do we have the subject on here? We don't have this. Thought we had subject. Oh, we added the subject on here. So you can come in and say, I want to look at only web work questions because those are the only ones that I like and I might want to edit. And this goes into what Tigran has comes in. These has a handful of questions here that you can add in for evaluating it. So if you only want to look at algorithmic questions in web work, you can go about doing that, saying I only use algorithmic questions. That's my standard. And you can do a search here and you can find the number of web work questions that are algorithmic. And right now it's 4,735. That number should be bigger. I'm not entirely sure why that number is smaller than we have. We've been working on trying to improve our search infrastructure because our search infrastructure is based predominantly on the meta tags on the question, not the actual content in the questions. That requires a more powerful search approach, a vector-based approach. We will get there, but we're not there right now. So we're relying on people who meta tag their questions. And if I asked you how many people do you think meta tag their questions, you probably have a good answer that the answer is in the low single digits. So students don't, not students, faculty don't meta tag their questions appropriately. And we were going to try to see if we can get AI in order to facilitate that. So anyways, I can come in and then I can look at these questions and say, well, here's a question. This right here is a simple calorimetry question. Do I like it? If I like it, I can copy it and I can paste it in the way I did before. Or if I like it here, I can just do a plus mark on here, and it just adds it directly to the assignment. Now, you can do that. Is it having some problems off of here? Okay. So, anyways, the this will add the questions to the assignment. So if I go to the assignment, you've seen that added a lot of questions down below. That's here. So let me summarize here. You can add questions to your assignment either by searching through the existing infrastructure where you have to identify various things like titles and authors and tags in order to be able to find more detailed issue. For example, if I want to do a search through calculus, I can then find that there's 1,386 questions with calculus in the title. Does that mean I have only 1,368 questions of calculus in the corpus? No. If I do a search on calculus in the tags, I come up with 6,140. This should be much higher. Is that people have had for those questions. So the searching can be really quite productive, but it can also be a bit frustrating until we build up our build up a better search infrastructure. It's the same reason why Google is all powerful, even though they got knocked down yesterday from the federal courts for a variety of reasons. Their search capabilities were just far superior than alternatives in the time of the late 90s. And such. So the upshot here is I encourage you to align your questions when you create questions in order to make sure it's easier in order to be able to find these questions effectively. And I'm hoping that the AI approach that we want to do, coupled with the vector database, will make this a lot more powerful in order to be able to find the questions that you want. For example, if you want to do a search on buffers, irrespective of whether they have tags here, you can find the word buffers in the text and things like that. Okay, now comes Tigran's question. So let's say I come in here, and so these are the questions that I brought in. So I brought some questions that are web work, iMath AS. This is iMath AS and a file, so it has open-ended component to it. I can come in and say, well, the open-ended component that's a file is unnecessary, and I turn it off. I, at times, used to provide open-ended questions to provide the opportunity for students to upload their work in order to do partial credit evaluation so that the score gives a certain value, but then I want to be able to evaluate what they did after the fact. So that's why sometimes I have open-ended with auto-graded, even for real-time feedback. Okay, now let's say I have a question that comes in. Mole-to-mole stoichiometry 1C. Here's the question. And let's say I don't like it. I like it 90%. It's not good enough. I want to customize it. Actually, interestingly enough, this one here does not have the, where's the, one second here. Okay. Most of the questions that we have here in the lower left-hand corner of here has a little button that says attribution. If you click on it, it will have an attribution requirement out there based on the author that's indicated on the question and the source material that's there. So this tells you what is connected to here. So this is meant for OER compliance or compliance with the open licensing in the OER, because most of what we have is OER related. So I'll just use this question, an example. So let's say I like this question, but I want to change something. I want to change that number to something else. So assuming it's not algorithmic, and I can look at the code in order to see that. This little button right here is the clone. This gives you ability to make a copy of this question where you are the owner, and you have the ability to edit it as needed. So do this thing, it's going to copy that question. It's going to put it into my own library area. It's called my question area. That is called clone questions. And I'm just going to copy it. And so this copies it in my area, and it also makes the duplicate. This is the duplicate in the fourth level of the library, and this is the copy that's put into my assignment. Does that make sense? Here's a question. I clone it. It has to go to the library area, the fourth level, because it needs a number. And then I add it back in automatically to this assignment right here. So I clone it. And now, if I view the questions here, it should say the word clone on here, right here. It says copy, not clone. So if I click on here, it's the same question because it's the same question. I cloned it. However, I own this question, which means I have editing rights on this question. So if I will have this pencil, and now I have the question right here. So this is what a question looks like. And the first thing I'll notice is that because this was cloned, it gives you where it came from. So the history is tracked here. If I were to clone this one again, it would then have another one, an arrow, and it shows you all the history. So for those of you that have some familiarity with blockchains, it's kind of like that. It'll show all the history of that question from every source out there, because everyone who comes in and edits that question and manipulates that question has the rights in order to have attribution connected to it, because that's what open licensing is put in place, including obviously the person who, the first person that puts it down there. So this is my clone, and this is what a question looks like. And then you could come in and modify the question, but that depends upon the nature of the question, how you actually modify it. So Tigran, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I have another question though,
Okay.
because let's say it says NC, right, which is no cost, I'm assuming, but a person is not aware of their career license rules and they accidentally take that out, Is there a limit to what licenses you could pick in the program, or we have to be cautious of the knowing the career company?
We need to put better logic on here. Right now, it's variable off of here. It should be inherited by here. What licensing that you're allowed to change. You can change the license, but so NC is non-commercial. It's not non-change. It's that would be no derivatives or ND. So if this were originally no derivatives, you would be unable to copy it. We don't allow you to copy things that are not meant to be derived to make adaptation.
Oh,
The same thing as if you actually were to dictate this as all rights reserved, then you would not be able to clone it. So we do have some limitations on here, but it does bring up a good point that these questions, these licenses right here are limited by the nature of the question, the original questions license, and that's not in place there. And that comes
oh,
in with a whole bag of issues, especially if you're transitioning from one license infrastructure like Creative Commons to other license infrastructures that are out there that have more limited issues.
so, I have another question. Sorry,
Mhm.
so this is a share link one, right? So it has to be exactly the way it is. Is there a way to program it where it limits what are the choices that we could pick
Yes,
based
that's what I
on?
was mentioning. So,
Oh, okay.
so I will go in. I'm going to put this into the our queue. It'll probably be a few weeks before we do it. So, based on this license, it will tell you what you're able to do here. So, in other words, this is CC BY NC share like the original source. So, this right here will only let you have CC BY NC share alike, and it should also only have 3.0 because that's what it originally was. I think.
Mm,
No, no, actually, this was 4.0. So you're unable to even change the version number. So we will change that logic to make it easier to be compliant with customizing the content that's out there.
okay. Thank you.
However, the reality is if you do everything on adapt, you don't take anything off of adapt, you're going to be 100% compliant with what we're doing. So you don't as long as you don't change the licensing beyond what you're able to do, which we're going to try to tweak, you're not going to have you don't need to worry about compliance and things like that. So
Okay.
so let's talk about what a question looks like. So now that I've cloned a question, I own this question. It does not mean that I am the author of the question. It just means that I have control over being able to edit the question. And that information is all stored by this question that's over there. So a question in ADAPT is set up in 4 different blocks. One is meta information. The other one is actually the question itself. The other one is accessibility alternatives, which I discussed before. And the last one is supplemental content. Uh, um, each of those things are important, but not all of them are critical for how a question is used. So it's if you want to provide a title, let's say if you want to provide some description behind that question, that's perfectly fine in order to do. This is probably what we would use AI in order to help facilitate that. Um, now, this is where things get more complicated. For right now, it's just a question, but we have the ability to store expositions. That's important for learning trees. Is in trees that are meant in order to educate, but they're not meant in order to evaluate. They're not an assessment. And a report is connected to AI-based learning, AI-based lab reports, and that's a different issue altogether. I can decide if I want my question to be public or private. Uh, it's the same thing as with the course. Essentially provides the opportunity if if instructors want to do a search, they can find that question in the search. You may have a reason that you want your questions to be private. You may create a whole bunch of questions for a very important high stakes exam, and you don't want anyone to ever be able to use them before you decide to do it. It's your prerogative. But Um, this tells you where it's stored. I mentioned that we have an area called your My Question area, and this right here is stored in a specific folder in My Question area called Clone Questions. I can move it around if I want. This is the author that's indicated onto it. It gave a copy of the original author. Um, this is the license, and like I mentioned, Tegram, we will probably limit this to, if it's share alike, to only the questions that you are allowed, only the licenses you are allowed based on the original license that you're putting together. That would be a smart thing to do, and it isn't until now that it occurred to me that we didn't do that. Licensing number is also connected to that. Uh, one of the requirements for Creative Commons licensing is to have a link to the source material. if possible. So you have the ability in order to put in the source URL. In fact, you have a requirement. If you don't have a source URL here, it's not going to save it. So in this case here, we wrote adapt.libretext.org because this was a question that was constructed on our platform as part of a grant with the state of California. So this was not harvested from some other source like OpenStax or something like that. If it were harvested from OpenStax, we would have the URL for the OpenStax there, and that would be meant for compliance with the open licensing. I will mention here that this is the information that's stored when you click the attribution section button that's on the question. When students click the attribution question, they get everything with the exception of the source URL, because we don't want to provide a mechanism for students to start searching through and try to find where the question might happen to be somewhere else, even if it has algorithmic capabilities and things like that. We just don't do that. That may not be fully compliant with the open licensing, but it's the only way I think we can operate with a question corpus that we don't want to have compromised by students. You can assign meta tags to that question. And if we want to, we can align the question to a specific framework. We have a series of frameworks out here. So if we grab chemistry OLI, I can say this question here, which is a mass to mass question. This is stoichiometry. I always misspell stoichiometry. And then I can identify, well, this question here deals with applying stoichiometry relationship and calculation to titrations. And I could click on that. And now I have assigned that framework descriptor to that question. So when I do a search for that specific framework again, it will pull up this question. And this is a bit more powerful than just meta tags because I'm aligning to a specific framework that I can then use to evaluate the nature of the, or at least used in order to describe the nature of the assignments that are in the course that I put together. I'm going to kill that because I need to give more thought off of here. And this right here is the actual question itself, this block. There are two sub blocks here. One is an HTML block and one is an auto-graded block. So if I were creating only an open-ended question, I would have the text in the block like write a story about dogs and cats. That right there would be an open-ended assessment. And I add that with a text block requirement as an open-ended block, and then that would be a perfectly fine question. It's an open-ended question, but it's a perfectly fine question. The second block is for auto-grade technologies. And again, we have 4 principal auto-grade technologies here. H5P is connected to this in a slightly different fashion because when you create an H5P question on the Studio, which is a repository for H5P, it automatically creates the question for us in Adapt, so you don't have to create it here. This right here is a web work question. If you are comfortable with Perl, this will be good to you. If you're uncomfortable with Perl or structured programming, you probably don't want to code in this or use this question. And this is essentially the argument I mentioned before. If you want the true power of these things, you got to deal with the complexities behind it in order to make it algorithmic and do all the things off of here. This thing is designed in order to make it so the solutions are also variable based on the nature of the question that's there. And each one of these things matters in the way that it's actually formulated. This is Perl. Perl was close to 30 years ago thought to be the next scientific language that people were going off of it, but it turned out that Python beat it out. So that's the preferential scientific language right now. Before that was probably MATLAB, which is still quite popular, and that's the one that I'm most comfortable with. But I can manipulate things off of here. So yes, Tigran.
Sorry. So can I write my IMath AS coding here instead of IMath AS?
You will eventually. Right now, you have to go to our iMath.AS server in order to write it there, or you can write it in MyOpenMath and just download it and then export it directly into our platform. We showed this to David Lippman, the individual who created um, MyOpenMath or iMath.AS, and he even created some scripts in order to be able to make it so we can do this, but we just haven't implemented it. And it's like 2 years ago, and still haven't gotten around to implement it. But the intent is in order to be able to do this and provide a simpler coding experience for whether it's web work or iMath.AS, because what David put together for iMath.AS is actually really quite beautiful in the construction infrastructure. Web work is a bit more complicated in the way that it's implemented. So, anyways, I could talk about here. This right here has a random component, so this is why this is a algorithmic question, because this changes randomly, and then all the solutions and things vary based off of this number that comes into it. Anyways, I digress. The key point I want to mention is that the students will see the sub block, that's the HTML block, plus the auto-graded block. So if I go in here and I preview, it has that text that I put at the top, and it has the auto-graded question here. Now, you guys are probably wondering, why did we do this? And the reason we did this is because we wanted to make Frankensteins. Frankensteins are our term of grabbing two different technologies that are not designed to work with each other, but to create a better question overall. For example, how many of you guys have heard of PhET simulations? Probably shouldn't be asking questions like this via Zoom because it's hard to get responses back in any feedback. A PhET simulation is a visualization that you can play around with in order to get it to simulate reality. And it's really a convenient little widget. Sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't. But it's a convenient little tool in order to do some sort of experiments. So if you want to do something that's, let's say, not necessarily guided inquiry, but it is something along the lines of visualizations and Socratically identifying something like that, you can say, here is a visualization. And for those of you that are not familiar with this, I really should show you a simulation. So this right here is a PhET simulation. So you have something like this, and you do something like you add these things together, and then you're asking, with this mass, what is that value or something like that. So it's meant in order to simulate a specific, excuse me, simulate a specific real time example. So you can put this block, you can embed this simulation into this block at the top, and then down below have a question connected to it. So I can come in, I think it's right here. There's some, I'm not sure where I guess they put it here. Here we go. So I can copy this code right here. And now I'm making a Frankenstein where the top block is the PhETs. There we go. The top block is the PhET simulation, and the bottom block is a question connected to the PhET simulation. So now I've taken this thing that's not designed to be an assessment and combined it with an assessment question for interacting with it. And that gives you the ability to grab anything that is not designed to be an assessment and pop it in there and then be able to spit this thing out. And this is just a scientific example. There are other things you could pop in there. For example, if you put in a snippet of CNN, it's allowed in order to be able to do that. And then you can have questions down below in terms of reading it. We're not storing it. We're just bringing it in, or what's called hot linking it. And it's perfectly allowed in order to do. Now there are some issues in terms of whether I get compromised or disappear or things like that, but it gives you the ability in order to do more powerful things than what you can do with just a single question by itself. That is a Frankenstein, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to delete this and close it. I can upload videos and audios here if I want to be able to do it, and I can manipulate this question however I want because I am the owner. Here's the accessibility alternatives. It has two blocks, but these blocks are not simultaneous like the content block. This is this is a text-based alternative to the question. And this right here is an auto-grade alternative if I want to be able to provide an auto-grade alternative. I don't need to do that because this question is already accessible. So I don't really need to do that. But if I did have that PhET simulation in there, it would not be accessible because that right there required dragging and moving things around. That's not an accessible interaction. So I'd have to have some sort of auto-graded alternative that would explain if I put this block at this mass into here and did this thing into here, what's the value that comes in there, and have them do the calculations and put it together. That we would have, that didn't have students that didn't have visual impairments would just be able to see graphically from the description. Yeah. So that right there is the accessibility alternatives, and which one that the students see is dependent upon how we indicate, when I showed you a couple hours ago, whether the student sees one or versus the other in the accessibility redirect. So the last part of the block that's connected to here is the supplemental content. The supplemental content has four components to it. One are notes. That's the easiest thing. That should be called private notes. That's essentially commentary on this question. So we can write down some issues in terms of where you want the question to go, if you want some feedback or things like that. This right here is a hint. So if you feel it's important in order to give a hint, and you can dictate that again by the assignment, you can then add the hint here. This hint here is a video, not a text base, and saying, look at this video describing how to go about doing it, and then go take a look at it. I can write an explicit solution block here. I did not need to do that because I wired it into the auto-graded component of that. I did that because it's algorithmic and I need the solution to change based on the question that they have. And that I can't do when it's an external block off here. And the answer is meant to be a single number or value here. We're probably going to decommission that because we've had that for several years and we've never used it or seen the need in order to be able to use it. So it just adds a bit more complexity behind here. So that's the upshot of what a question looks like in our database. Especially in this case here, a cloned question. And you can manipulate this however you want because you own it and you're able to process this in a variety of ways. I understand that this is a bit more daunting in order to be able to master, but you don't need to master it necessarily, because if the questions are already created and solve what your problems are, then you don't need to worry about that. I will mention that we do work from with teams from time to time in order to be able to code up questions for specific teams based on need, or based if there's actually some financial buy-in to pay for the students who are actually doing that development. Much of this stuff is done by our student team at UC Davis that are trained in order to be able to go through here and write the solutions and write the answer, the code and all the thing like that. And the return on investment is really quite ideal. So anyways, I'm going to stop that. There were a few questions that were in the chat room before we actually start to migrate into how to integrate these questions in a course to your learning management system. So let's get to the top here. Jennifer asked about tolerances. I mentioned that the tolerances are hard-coded into the question, and we can actually vary that depending upon how you want to go about doing it. We also have hard-coded into many of the questions significant digits. Significant digits intrinsically includes tolerances if used explicitly, but we do tend to introduce additional tolerances beyond what significant digits are capable of doing. Okay. Dong, are you still here? Yes, you are. You're filling out some form. You have some questions in order to address. Let's hold off on that until a little bit later on if we can. Georgia asked about significant, but share alike means share alike, so the license would need to be the same. That's true. Then there's a link of Creative Commons licensing, which is always enjoyable in order to read over. Um, Georgia, is there a requirement for video hints to be fully accessible? Auto captions on YouTube are not always accessible. That's a really good question. In reality, actually everything should be accessible, or you have an alternative in order to make it accessible. So if you give a video that's out there, it also has to be accessible. Now, when we upload videos to our platform, um, this is not uploaded. This is an iframed in video. But when we have the ability in order to actually, this option here should be on all of them. And I'm wondering why it's not. Uh, we can upload a video directly um, to our um, instances, to our computers. When we do that, we process the video through what's called Whisper. Whisper is a chat GPT or OpenAI based tool that that generates a caption for it. And it works very well, much better than what YouTube generates. It also works very well in multiple languages, which is really quite beautiful because it was tested out quite extensively in Spanish. So every time we upload this, we provide that mechanism in place in order to be able to provide a transcript in order to make sure that things are accessible, or from the transcript at the transcript level. So you shouldn't have to worry about that in much detail. Okay. Okay. So Jason, is the framework adapt speak for learning objectives? Yes. So a framework is a pre-existing set of meta tags that are fixed or pseudo fixed. Those can be learning objectives. They could be taxonomies. Could be skills. They could be a variety of different things that are out there. So for those of you that are interested, if you go to frameworks down here, you'll see a set of frameworks already in place. I went to the OLI, the Open Learning Initiative that's out of Carnegie Mellon. So they have a framework for dealing with chemistry, but you have Marzano's framework, which is actually relatively uh, unimpressive. It's a little bit more expanded than Bloom's taxonomy that you can use in order to be able to apply to what you're doing. The key point is that it's a fixed set of meta tags. So you don't have people coming in and misspelling different meta tags, and that might not be able to sync things up constructively. That's out there. I mentioned Bloom's on here somewhere. Here we go. But even Bloom's taxonomy is really quite simple in order to be able to implement. For those of you in California, we brought in a lot of frameworks from the CID infrastructure. That's the infrastructure used for course identification numbers, basically making it so that courses at different campuses are able to articulate to other campuses. And but those are oftentimes only 15 to 20 descriptors. They're not overly detailed, not compared to many of these other ones. We also grabbed the learning objectives from the OpenStax books. They are not well developed learning objectives, but they are oftentimes quite detailed in order to be able to operate with. And it gives the approach in order to be able to come in and say, well, here is a framework of microbiology that you can use in order to be able to align to. And if it works for you, then that's fine. So, okay. Second part of your question, Jason, is does the framework come from the text I put together or can it come from other sources? The frameworks right now are constructed directly here. You can come from a variety of different sources. You can implement your new framework right here. And you can generate in an Excel form and upload it. And you have the ability in order to come in and start to edit these frameworks if you decide that you want to go about doing it, if you have permission in order to do so. but this account does not have the ability in order to edit doesn't own these things, so it's unable to edit it. But when you do own it, you have some editing rights on here in order to be able to manipulate it and do other things to the framework that's in place. We cannot do the learning analytics without having a framework with the questions aligned to it, at least not at the advanced level. So we're going through efforts in order to try to align as many questions as possible to these frameworks. But at 250,000 questions, it's a long time. If we were working nonstop, it would take 1 month in order to do this. And we're hoping AI is going to be able to facilitate that. We're pretty sure AI is going to do that. We just need to be able to wire it up and hone it. Okay. Neil was being snarky about how comfortable people are with Perl because Perl is not a very enjoyable language in order to code into. Okay. Dr. Camus asked 508 considerations creating hot links. Basically, if you bring in anything from other sources, you're at the will of, if you iframe things from other sources or you hot link things from other sources, meaning you kind of copy the link so that when Adapt pulls up the question, it really grabs it from a different website, then it will be if I bring it, if the source material brings down the site, then my question gets compromised. And that right there is one of the reasons why we tend to avoid linking in general or hot linking specifically. Hot linking also comes with some ethical issues in order to address. Okay. Garima left. I think I will upload the videos as soon as I can. Jason asks, does the solution block allow you to implement LaTeX? Yes. It's just like editing any of our blocks. It has MathJax fully embedded. Patricia wants to talk to me offline, and I think she may have already left. We are slowly evaporating. Okay, so where are we now? We can build courses. We can import courses, we can build assignments, we can import assignments, we can add questions to the assignments that we find by browsing through other people's questions or other people's courses, or we can do searches through them and bring it in. If we find a question that we like that we want to be able to edit because we don't own it, we can clone it and then we can manipulate and edit it as necessary. But that obviously requires some level of competency in the nature of the question type itself. Web work is daunting. IMathAS is a little bit less daunting, but not significantly less daunting. It's written in what's called PHP. But if you want to be able to build a question in QTI, it will look very similar to what you've seen before. So if I click native and I pick QTI here, I have these 7 question types. It's the same sort of question types that you would have in your learning management system. Many learning management systems have more than 7, but most of the people use only these 7. So if I pick multiple choice, then I have a prompt that come in here. This is a question. And then I have serious responses off of here. Right now, it's only 2. I can then add multiple responses here and then decide I want this question and this question. Actually, right now it's only set for a single question, single answer, and say this is answer 1. I can have feedback depending upon if this is how they selected. This is question 2, and I can have feedback associated with that. This should look familiar to you because many of you have already been exposed to these sort of things in your learning management system. It's relatively straightforward in order to do because it's a very formulated, restricted question type in contrast to IMathAS or web work, which is a very flexible coding-based experience for doing so. So the upshot is if I scare you with the Perl question, this right here should not scare you. And if you have question banks already created in Canvas, you can import them. They come into here and then you can tweak them and manipulate them in this way. And we have a few additional components here that you don't get with QTI, like randomized responses and things like that, that's available for you, or being able to upload videos and audios and things like that, but including LaTeX if you want to be able to do that, because that's rendered in any of these HTML blocks that we have there. Okay. So that right there can get you going a long way. There's still a lot involved in this, but we have 40 minutes left. Georgia, everything that's here is accessible because it's codified um, and such. So uh, let's talk about embedding questions into learning management system. I think this is what several people had mentioned that they wanted to definitely be able to see. And I know that Tuat Dong, you have a series of questions that you want to be able to address. I can address, I still have you in my memory, but I want to be able to address it near the end. Okay, so at this point, I can't show you how to go about doing this thing because I actually don't have a learning management system that I can couple to because UC Davis doesn't have it hooked into. So in fact, many of you already can do this better than I can. But I can actually pull up a video that shows you how it works and I'll run from there. So I'm going to go to the support. I'm going to look at the insight and I'm going to do a search off of LMS. So um, I have a series of questions here. I'm going to select coupling adapt to Canvas. So the third one down here via LTI and API, because that's the easier way in order to go about doing this. So just as a reminder, all LMSs that are couplable to adapt can be coupled via LTI, specifically LTI 1.3, if you want a version number connected to it. Canvas is special because we also coupled into it via the API. Now, the LTI only gives you the ability to transfer two things. It can transfer student scores and it can transfer rosters. At least those are the two things that I'm most familiar with. Maybe there's some things on the side that I'm not familiar with. That's it. And that is only it. The API, when we have that approved with a specific campus's IT administrator, gives us the ability to do a lot more. So what would we want to go about doing it? Well, let me see if this actually pulls up here. So um, share the video in chat. This is the video that I have right now. Um, hold on a second here. I want to make sure it's actually shows the right video. Okay, this is just basically making sure that your course is an LMS course. Uh, so this is not going to be overly exciting because it's only making sure that at the bottom here, this button here needs to be flipped on to yes. If you don't have that as yes, you are not coupling to any LMS, period. So that's one of the aspects here. This is not the okay. So we're going to go through, and there's some text or some audio connected to here that's not being recorded, it's not shown. And this is showing how you operate with LTI only with Canvas. Now, the reason I'm showing this thing is for you to appreciate what the API interface does, that I strongly recommend that you do. And the issue that we have here is that when you make a course up in Adapt and you hook it into your LMS, okay, you need to be able to do this assignment by assignment. So if you have 10 assignments in Adapt, you need to make 10 modules in Canvas and wire them up manually, each one. And that process is not difficult, but it can be very mind-numbing if you have to do it over and over and over again. Now, so this is an example in order to show you this thing. So you create an assignment in Canvas. It's making a test. You don't need to write anything down. You identify the points and everything that you have connected to here. Now if your course, if you're hooked into Canvas already, you will have Adapt as an external tool, as a URL. If you're IT did not set it up properly, then you're not going to have that option there. And that is part of the handshaking between a campus administrator and us in order to make sure that it's a tool that you have available. So once you've done this and you have access to it, it's adapt. The nice thing about adapt is it starts with A. So it's at the top of the alphabetical list. You click on it. I don't know why he's going all the way down there. Stop that. So this is just a dev site. It doesn't matter. So this opens the tool in a new tab and you save it. You don't see my screen? Do people not see my screen, my YouTube screen?
We see it.
Oh, okay. Natalie, you say you only see us, but you should see it.
See the link to LMS.
Yeah, that should be what's on the screen right now. I'm also recording this, so you'll be able to take a closer look at it. Okay. So where are we? This was tested at Kansas State. This is identifying what course that we are coupling to from the adapt side. You identify the course and you link the assignment. And now it comes in, and here's the course. Here's the assignment right there. It's coupled to it. And again, this exposition has audio connected to it. So you can, what's this? Okay. And you move through in order to couple these things. So it's already coupled for the assignment. And you have to go through this step by step in order to be able to do it. I'm going to skip over some of these additional things. That right there is not the way that I recommend you doing it. What I recommend you doing it is this way, because it's actually just a two button push and it solves everything. Okay. I'm going to paste this into the chat. So when your LMS allows both LTI and API communication to adapt, you'll get this button at the top here that basically says this course is being served to an LMS. It's an LMS course when you've designated it. You can create assignments and adapt. And if you grant access from adapt to your course, which you're allowed to do on your Canvas, it will then create all those assignments manually and link them all together in one button. And that's what this is showing you how it works. So this is what you get. You have two buttons that you need to do. One button is to couple to your campus LMS. So this is going to whatever LMS that he had hooked into. So it's now coupled to the LMS, and specifically my user. And now I need to identify which of my courses in my LMS do I actually want to hook into, because I may have multiple courses. In fact, I almost always do. So you can select here and say that you have Henry test course on the Canvas side. Once we do that and you click it, it will go through assignment by assignment. These are silly names that we have here, and it will automatically create it on Canvas and link them together. It takes, a moment. You can see it all the way going down here. And now it's hooked into it. So if you go to the Canvas site, you see each of the entries right here, ready to go. If you want to, you can organize into different modules and things like that with Canvas in order to be able to organize it in a different way than you may not want to do. This right here makes things a lot easier in order to be able to implement than trying to do manual LTI interface in order to be able to process that. And such. And what I don't remember was the finer details about the dates and times because we did address it. I just don't remember exactly how we addressed it. And that's Star Trek. You can see what I tend to watch when I'm not doing Adapt. Okay. There are a few questions and issues associated with this that you can address via this insight system. There are more advanced things that you can do that we're still kind of polishing. So for example, if you create a course up if you couple these things together in one term and then the next term comes around again, the way that I talked about is you'd have to reset everything up in the Canvas course. And what many people want to do is just to copy the existing Canvas course and bring it over to a new course, a new term, and hope that all the links and all the coupling works in doing so. That's actually really quite a pain in the rear in order to be able to do that, to clone it and make sure everything is all put together. We have much of this already put together, and we may have already completed it. I'm not entirely sure, via a partnership with Maricopa Community College District, which has an interest in order to be able to facilitate this sort of approach, especially in dealing with a large pool of temporary instructors and being able to control their infrastructure, control their course approaches off of that. Those things will be available online. You can come through and see questions or see topics in Insight. I encourage you to take a look at it. That will go into different features here and there. Many of them are with videos, just like what was shown available right there and such. That's a general viewpoint. I wish I was able to do this real time on my site, even though we do have an a Canvas instance. So I might be able to figure out how to actually couple into it, but it's the programmer who typically does these sort of things, and I stay back off of that. Sylvester asked a question, when will Adapt be available in D2L? I expect by the end of this month. I have to process some paperwork in order to get access to it. The programmer who will interface D2L with Adapt has already done it for a separate technology earlier this year. So it's largely copy, paste, and tweak a little bit and make it work. So I don't expect it to be overly complicated. It's just D2L that makes things a little bit more complicated in terms of the framework that they have, or the hoops that they have in order to be able to put it in place. That being said, it will still, you'll have to do it manually, because we're not going to have the API interface put together in D2L. So you're probably going to have to do the equivalent of manually coupling it together. And to be honest, I have never seen what's inside D2L, so I don't entirely know what it's going to look like. But I presume it's very similar to Canvas and other LMSs, I presume. So, okay. Any other questions or concerns about coupling to LMSs? The biggest issue is to make sure your campus has hooked up their LMS to Adapt. That takes the most time. These little buttons in order to couple in a course to a specific course and things like that is pretty straightforward in order to be able to implement. So
Did you see the question from Tutong? Can I integrate
top?
Adapt to Canvas?
You mean
Yes,
the big one?
yeah, I saw the YouTube video. Thank you.
I can address that now. I know I posted. I'm going to paste it down here for everybody, so you can see what she had mentioned. Okay, so you're filling out a form request Adapt on Canvas. Technical contact information.
This form is from my school. I just send them they send me the form I have to fill up. So I don't know how to answer all this information for the form.
Yeah, so each campus has its own
Yeah.
own infrastructure. Hold on a second here.
So I
So
send them
Eric Keene is the primary
thank you.
programmer. I'm pretty sure this is the right email. I might be wrong, and it might be one of these. I'm sorry for not keeping it. So most of the time we just go directly to here in order to be able to have them, where is it? Directly to contact support, and then you just basically have them do this. But it sounds like you guys want a little bit more. Upload
Yeah.
privacy data to for the okay. Um, at the bottom of our pages have accessibility and legal things. Different campuses have different rules and words that they and forms that they want to fill out. So I need to take a closer look in terms of what specific things that they want. So if you go to accessibility, you'll see our accessibility statement and our VPATs. So if you just give this link to them, it should be more than enough. And you tell them that it's adapt, that they need to be able to specifically adapt to students' accessibility conformance report. The privacy policies, that might be something that they want the HECVAT for. And that right there is a separate site that we have somewhere. Let me see, I'm trying to pull up these things in different spots. So here's our FERPA statement. And these are, again, at the bottom of the ADAPT website for you to do. This is just largely and the accessibility conformance reports is basically what those links are there. I'm not trying to throw lots of things your way, but this right here should probably get you going a bit in order to be able to address it. And again, if you need a full-blown VPAT, then let us know and we can give you those details for security purposes.
Thank you.
Uploading technical documentation, installing and configuring. Please upload any accessibility document VPAT. Okay, that's what you have, but not the HECVAT. So you have the links to that. So the technical documentation is sorry, I'm not trying to make things complicated, but they are by default. The last thing is the interfacing canvas configuration. Just for we got some of this. There's a video that we have somewhere posted into here. How to add a person admin to a Canvas comic. Like I said, most of the time this is a direct discussion between their programmer, the IT, and our programmer, which would be the best way in order to go about doing this if they're willing to accept it. Otherwise, I can ask my programmer in order to spit this thing out for you. So why don't you send me an email and then I can get you the details that you need here. The rest are just kind of trying to nitpick here and there and whatever your campus desires. Like I said, every campus has their own set of paperwork that they want to be able to before they pursue.
Can I have your email again, please?
Delmar@libertex.org. I'll paste it here. Right there. And then you can just spin off. There's probably only one Delmar in chemistry in the world. So if you did a search between Delmar and chemistry, you'll be
Unique. Thank you.
Are you going to be able to supply the chat as well as the YouTube videos?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think it's saved. I think Zoom saves it. Sometimes I get surprised about what Zoom does and doesn't do, but I think it saves the chat, and I'll post it. I'll put it into the conductor page that you guys are all available, and you can parse through that.
That'd be great. My power went out through midway through.
Okay, and the video too. So as soon as this thing is over, I'm going to start processing the videos, but it may take a day or two, depending upon how long it works in order to make it work.
Thanks, Delmar.
Okay, so we are at 2:42. That means we have 18 minutes if we want to continue this conversation. If we do want to continue this conversation, we can go through learning trees. I can give you a general overview of that. We don't have enough time in order to start building learning trees. If you have a different topic that you'd like us to be able to discuss, I'm quite open in order to be able to address that. Anton has 3 exclamation points, so I guess that means that learning trees is what we're going to be doing, because you can't challenge 3 exclamation points. So let's go about doing that. So I'm going to exit my login. I'm going to do this as my account. I just want to show you a little bit about what my big classes use. So this right here is my big general chemistry class. And these are all the different assignments that students have. This is one of the reasons why I hide these things from students, so they don't see all these things to begin with, because it's a bit daunting for them to access. Okay, so let's go to learning trees. And first thing to recognize is that a learning tree is meant to be an alternative to a single question. So this right here is a assignment of learning trees. You can call it an orchard if you want to be able to continue the analogy. Each learning tree has a little Christmas tree next to it. So it reminds us that this is more than just a single question. Each learning tree has an ID number. Now, the idea behind a learning tree is that it's a framework of multiple questions and multiple expositions as nodes that are structured in a certain topology to be useful. So in other words, it's an aggregate or a collection of things. It's one of the reasons why it takes more time to create than a single question. So this question 13 is that one, 22 is that one, 57 is that one, 58 and 60 are that one. You can go through and peruse any of the learning trees here by browsing learning trees. I'm going to open this thing up in a new tab here, which didn't. And these are the learning trees that you and I have the ability to peruse. Like I said, most of them are dealing with general chemistry. I have a student right now, it's an advanced student that's working on 100 trees in general chemistry, but we have a desire in order to expand this into not just general chemistry, to all of chemistry and even outside of chemistry. So each of these things has a specific ID numbers. Why is there not 1 through 7? There were 1 through 7. They were deleted. They were not considered good enough, or they were just playing around or whatever. So here's the author of them. And such. And if I want to do a search, I do a search, expand the scope here and see if Audie has been working. And I think he's been creating his things individually. So let's take a look at a learning tree. So I'm going to go to Gibbs Energy and Equilibrium. This is a relatively simple learning tree because it has only 2 branches. The top of the learning tree is a question. This is what students see when they actually go through a learning tree assignment. And it has this question that looks like this, which is a relatively straightforward question. It's actually kind of cute. I'm not sure who created it, but it has, spontaneous, non-spontaneous, and some question dealing with the nature of delta G for that process. The key point to emphasize in learning trees is that the root question needs to be a reasonably complex question. That it needs to involve multiple skills in order to be able to do. If it's a very simple concept test, or concept question, whatever they call those things, that has only one simple concept involved in it, the learning tree is not overly useful for it, because the learning tree intent is to be able to provide a mechanism to identify the skills that are necessary to address that root question. And if there's only one skill to address that root question, it's not necessary. So that right there is the root question. The way that we formulated learning trees, and I'll be honest, you can structure this in different ways. This is just the one that we felt that was the most applicable. We then have an exposition node. Each of these nodes, and there are 6 nodes here, you'll notice are color-coded. One is blue and one is red. The ones that are blue are assessments. So those are ones that are auto-graded questions. The ones that are red are expositions. They're meant in order to instruct. So in this case here, this is that root assessment to evaluate. This right here is exposition. The first exposition node is meant in order to provide some guidance. So the intent that we have is when the student has this question, if they get it right, they then go on to the next question. If they get it wrong, we want to encourage them in order to interact with the learning tree and get some details about what skills they need to master in order to be able to be successful here. So basically to do what a tutor is intended on doing without involving a tutor. Now, in this case here, we're not trying to use a black box to take the place of it. We're trying to let students use the opportunity that they have to peruse this learning tree in order to learn directly themselves. In other words, we're trying to train students to learn, which I think is what we should all be doing. And I think that black box solutions do not do that. Strongly I believe that they don't do that. So anyways, the first thing that we want to do when they come in here is just to give them a lowdown. Okay, well, you didn't answer the root question correctly. These are the concepts that you need to understand in order to answer that question effectively. This is the branches that are in the tree in order to be able to help address these things. In an ideal manner, there's at least a one-to-one correspondence to concepts to branches. But there may be more branches than concepts. This is an example where this is opposite. I would want to have more branches in this learning tree, to be honest. And the idea is that the students can go to a different branch that addresses a specific skill that they need to master. But the exposition, each branch starts with an exposition. It could be a series of expositions, or it could be one exposition node that the students are meant in order to learn something, saying, you need to learn multiple skills in order to master this question. Here's one of the skills. Let's just discuss that in detail. So it's a deconstructivist approach, ripping it apart and saying, here are what you need to do. And then this is where you go in order to learn this. This is where you go to learn this. This is where you go to learn this. This is where you go to learn this. And let the students decide where they want to go. That's the metacognition aspects that we want to be able to push. So in this case here, the student goes to exposition, and the exposition is a video. So nothing says it needs to be text-based, but this is an exposition. This right here is a text-based exposition. This is actually an example. So instead of being explicit about it, saying, here's an example of this, learn something from this. And then from that, demonstrate that you're able to do some specific thing. In this case here, identify the reaction quotient for a specific question. You could formulate this in a wide variety of things. You can have the same skill with 3 different branches. One is text-based exposition, one's a video, one's a PhET simulation, like I showed before, that you have to play around with and then learn from, experiment about how things are done. Different students will have different preferences of what they want to use or study off that. It's up to them to decide what we're doing. The key point is that the student earns the do-over when they've actually successfully gone through each of the nodes from the very top to the very bottom. That could be in multiple paths. There are 2 paths possible here in order to be able to address that. When it's exposition, right now it's based on time. So you can say this needs to have 1 minute or 2 minutes that they need to interact with this exposition node. So they need to read. Hopefully they need to read instead of dilly-dally. Same thing here. They need to spend a certain amount of time on here in order to be able to master that. And then they need to demonstrate some level of proficiency in this question to show that they understand that specific skill. And then once they've done that, if you decide that only as one path is necessary as a criterion, they get their do-over. If you want to use an analogy, this is the equivalent of an extra life in Ready Player One. They get their Ready Player One extra life, and they can come back up here and they get this question again. If this question is designed well, it should be algorithmic. This one here is not set up like that. And so it will change. So the students need to demonstrate their proficiency on a similar question to what they've done before, but not the same question. And if they fail that question again, they have the opportunity to go into the tree and go down a different path and then earn the do-over again, or earn that extra life and come back up again. In this case here, they can only do it twice and such. That's the basic essence of a learning tree and how it's formulated. Key point is that each of these nodes has a specific question or a specific exposition entry added to it. So it actually has a bit more complexity. So instead of course assignment question, it's course assignment tree node then question. So it's actually a 5-level issue. And that right there adds a bit more complexity to how you formulate these things. So let's talk about how you can create a tree in the last few minutes of this thing. If I come into here in terms of my learning trees in the upper right-hand corner, I can then get the interface of my learning trees. So I'm just going to build a new learning tree. I can clone a learning tree from someone else's tree, just like I did before when I cloned a question. But I'm going to build a new learning tree right here, and I'm going to call it tree 1. I love trees. I hate trees. I can make it public or private. I don't care. And now this is a tree. Now, it doesn't look very impressive because I don't have any nodes in the tree. So there are different approaches in order to do these things. What I like to do is I like to build empty nodes and formulate the tree that I want to be able to put in place. Now, in order to build a tree, you need to do a little bit of preparation work in order to ask, how do I want my tree to look like? What is the question I want to have at the top? What are the skills necessary in order to be able to master that question down below? And ultimately, if you could do it beforehand, identify which specific questions addresses those specific skills that you have in place. So you have access to a lot of questions, and odds are that there are questions in order to address what you want right here, hopefully, depending upon your field. And this right here is an empty set of trees. Now I can double click in here and I can add a assignment or an adapt number right here in the same way that I added a question to an assignment before. So let's say I want, I'm just going to grab a question that I have available. Let's say I want this question right here. I can copy this question ID. I can paste this right here to refresh the node, and now I've added it to that node. And now instead of gray being empty, it's now a proper node with a question that holds into it. So basically the node is what you put the question into it. And can you change it? Yes, I can pull out that question and put in a different question in order to be able to formulate these things, which makes it convenient because you can actually build multiple learning trees that have the same sort of framework, but different questions at the top for what you have in place. And I can come in here and then I can create my own assignment, my own question, and then embed it directly into here. I'm not sure what this adapt number, it doesn't really have any meaning right there and such. So I think it's best in order to not continue this beyond this argument. This gives you the ability to drag and drop. That gives you the ability to formulate the tree that's in place. Every time you change it, it automatically saves the tree. So you don't need to worry about saving or if your computer crashes or things like that. And such. It's exceedingly powerful. I'm very excited about it. It just takes time in order to be able to do and to do well. Now, Anton asked a question, is there a limit on how deep a learning tree can be? Are you asking about something like this? I mean, is this what you're asking? Yeah. Okay. There's no limit. We do have some some space constraints on the screen, but you can keep on going about this. You may want to do something like this if you have a series of expositions. That's useful in order to present something. Like for example, if you want to be able to learn something, a specific skill, and you feel that you need to scaffold it by saying, look, here's this exposition, now let's build upon this, now build upon this, and now evaluate what's going on. You can do that. Or you can have multiple evaluation nodes at the bottom. Says, well, here's a couple expositions or one big exposition. Let me test your ability to master the specific skill in 2 or 3 different ways before you can actually advance that. You have that flexibility. You have the ability in order to branch these things off in multiple branches here. So for example, in chemistry, we have an issue that students don't learn math quite as well as they used to. So a common issue that we have if we're dealing with stuff that involves logarithms, like pHs, students don't understand logarithms. So it's not unheard of in order to make a branch here that focuses on, do you know logarithms? Do you know how to do exponential behavior? Very basic principles that you may need to address. And it provides a reminder that students, yes, this is something you need to master for doing something like that. If you don't know what a natural logarithm is, this is a little bit of exposition to help you along in order to be able to address it. And such. Georgia, can a tree be copied and adjusted? Yes. So in the very beginning that I had here, on my trees, I had clone learning trees, so I can clone someone else's tree, and then I can start to manipulate it however I want. And such. So in the last couple of minutes, let me tie everything together in terms of what we've discussed in the last 6 to 7 hours. Adapt is an exceedingly powerful tool. We're very excited with what Adapt is able to do. We're very excited with what Adapt will be able to do as we start to continue to develop the technologies and as more people contribute to Adapt. You are able to build your own courses. You're able to build assignments. You're able to add existing questions to assignments. Making questions is a different issue, and it has a bit of complexity depending upon your own skill set. And you can peruse the learning, the study guides, which I'll actually, not the study, construction guide, I'll post that in the conductor page after this meeting is over. And there's some videos for you to be able to explore off of that. But that right there gets you through the door. The ability to couple it to your learning management system is obviously very useful for many of you guys that like LMSs, which I am not one of, in order to process this. And Adapt is called Adapt because it's adaptive learning infrastructure based around decision trees, which we call learning trees, which plenty of evidence is arguing that this is a superior way to then to just giving individual questions for students that are out there. It just takes time in order to be able to build these questions and use them effectively. But we have been making serious headway off of that for the last year and a half, again, thanks to the support from the state of California. As I mentioned before, any verified instructor anywhere in the world can get access to the question bank and tap into it and use it for your own needs. If you want to use it as a homework system, if you're in the state of California, it's freely available for you to tap into. If you're out of the state of California, it costs $10 per student per term. And the intent is to make sure that what we create is sustainable and doesn't collapse and get thrown into the corner like many other projects oftentimes do with lack of support that's out there. So I thank you for your attention. I know there's a lot of details involved in here. I brushed a lot underneath the rug, but I hope you share our enthusiasm and use this as much as you feel that's comfortable for that. If you have any questions or concerns, you can certainly email us. If you desire, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 o'clock Pacific time, we have office hours. I did not have it today because of obviously this meeting, although some people may have come in and wondered what was going on because it uses the same room ID number or same URL as what you guys used in order to sign in. And we do various trainings from time to time, both in person and also online. And such. We're very excited that you were able to attend. For those of you that are going to be participating in the Cal OER meeting starting tomorrow morning, I look forward to seeing you there. Cable Green from Creative Commons is our kickoff inaugural speaker, and I'm very excited in order to present him. And then we have a very exciting schedule for the next 2 days and such. So I encourage you to be there. With that, thank you very much. I will step away and